There's something about the human body that most people miss. It doesn't scream when something's wrong, at least not at first. It whispers, a flicker in your nails, a subtle change in your voice, a weird kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It's not dramatic enough to panic over, so most of us don't. We just brush it off, tell ourselves we're getting older, or it's just stress. But the body, it doesn't forget. And these little signals, they're not just background noise. They're early warnings, the kind that, if caught in time, could literally change the rest of your life. I remember my grandmother's hands, how she'd look at them sometimes with a curious expression, the slight blue tinge around her nail beds, the swelling in her knuckles she dismissed as just arthritis. We found out later her heart had been struggling for months. Her body knew. It was telling her story in small, quiet ways we all missed until it became a crisis. These whispers, they're the language of prevention. The difference between addressing something when it's manageable and fighting it when it's entrenched. Between a simple intervention and a lifetime of management. And yet we've become masters at drowning out these signals, with busy schedules, with noise, with the peculiar modern belief that discomfort is something to push through rather than listen to. You see it every day, maybe in the mirror, maybe in someone you love. A nail that turns yellow and ridged. A voice that's just a little raspier than usual. Your hands swell slightly when you wake up, or your socks leave deeper marks on your skin. A mole that hasn't changed dramatically, just subtly darkened over months. A thirst that seems excessive but not alarming. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't stop you from going to work, but it lingers. That's how the body talks. It doesn't beg for attention. It tests you. Are you paying attention to the small things? Or are you waiting for it to break? There's something almost sacred about this relationship between you and the quiet intelligence of your own system. The body knows things before you do, before tests can detect them, before doctors can name them. Consider Patricia, who noticed her handwriting getting smaller over 6 months. Just a little cramped, nothing worth mentioning to anyone. 3 years later came the Parkinson's diagnosis. That handwriting change had been one of the earliest signals, appearing years before the tremor. Or Michael, who thought his sudden preference for looser neckties was just middle-age spread. It was actually an early thyroid enlargement that, left untreated, would have eventually compromised his breathing. These aren't dramatic examples. They're the quiet reality of how health changes begin. Not with collapse, but with whispers. It didn't happen by accident. These things never do. Tiny symptoms are often early signs of big systems breaking down. That yellowed, ridged nail, it can be a clue to thyroid imbalance or even heart disease. That subtle change in your voice, sometimes it's acid reflux or something pressing on your vocal nerves. And chronic fatigue that feels more like fog than exhaustion. It could be anemia, autoimmune issues, or early-stage diabetes. The signs are rarely loud, because your body assumes you'll listen before it needs to yell. But if you follow the thread, it leads somewhere. And it's better to catch that path early than to backtrack later. Let's look deeper at these 5 seemingly minor signals that deserve your attention. Changes in your nails. Not just color, but texture, pitting. Ridges that weren't there before. Separation from the nail bed. Your nails are windows into your circulation, your oxygen levels, your nutrient absorption. When something shifts in these systems, your nails often register the change months before other symptoms appear. They're like geological records, marking time and change in visible layers. Unexplained voice changes. A voice that grows hoarse without a cold. A persistent roughness. A pitch that drops slightly. Your vocal cords are extraordinarily sensitive. They respond to inflammation, to pressure, to changes in your endocrine system. That slight raspiness could be nothing. Or it could be your thyroid changing shape, pressing where it shouldn't. It could be silent reflux, damaging delicate tissues over time. New patterns of swelling. Fingers that don't quite fit your rings in the morning. Socks that leave deeper impressions than they used to. Shoes that feel tight by evening. Fluid retention patterns tell stories about your kidney function, your heart efficiency, your lymphatic system. They're early markers of systems struggling to maintain balance. Subtle skin changes. A patch that's suddenly always dry no matter what cream you use. A faint yellow tinge in your palm creases. A bruise that takes longer to fade than it should. Your skin is your largest organ, and often the first to signal internal distress. These changes aren't simply cosmetic. They're your body displaying its chemical and circulatory reality on its surface. That strange new fatigue. Not the kind that makes you want to sleep, the kind that makes you feel heavy, like moving through molasses, like your battery can't hold a charge. This isn't normal aging or just being busy. It's your metabolism sending signals about what it can and cannot process, about inflammation that hasn't reached pain level but is consuming your energy, about tiny cells struggling to receive what they need. The signs are rarely loud, because your body assumes you'll listen before it needs to yell. But if you follow the thread, it leads somewhere, and it's better to catch that path early than to backtrack later. And maybe that's the hardest part. It's not that we didn't see the signs, it's that we didn't think they were serious, because we've been taught to ignore discomfort unless it becomes pain. But pain, that's already stage 2. The first stage is the whisper. And if we don't listen, we lose time. Not just years on a chart, but the kind of time that's mobile, clear-headed, independent. No one wants to wake up and realize they missed the warning that could have bought them a decade of better living. There's a strange intimacy in this truth, that your body is constantly communicating with you. That beneath consciousness, beneath your busy thoughts and plans, an ancient intelligence is monitoring millions of processes and sending you signals when things drift out of balance. The tragedy isn't in getting sick. The tragedy is in missing the conversation that could have changed the outcome. I think about James, who ignored the tiny yellow spots appearing in his vision. Floaters, he called them. Normal aging. By the time he mentioned them casually to his doctor 18 months later, the retinal damage had progressed to the point where treatment options were limited. If I'd known, he told me, if I'd just mentioned it sooner. Or Elaine, who dismissed her suddenly cold hands as poor circulation until the day she couldn't button her shirt. The early nerve damage had progressed to the point of functional impairment. I thought it was just getting older, she said. I didn't realize it was my body trying to tell me something important. We've developed a strange relationship with our physical selves in this era. We track steps and heart rates with digital precision, yet miss the analog signals our bodies have been evolved to provide. We've outsourced our awareness to devices while ignoring the most sophisticated monitoring system we'll ever possess, our own embodied intelligence. And somewhere in this disconnect, we've forgotten how to listen before crisis, how to notice patterns, how to respect the quiet dignity of a body that's trying, desperately trying, to maintain balance while sending you gentle notifications that something needs attention. There's a profound difference between treating disease and preventing its progression, between managing symptoms and addressing root causes before they manifest as breakdown. This isn't just about longevity, adding years to your chart. It's about quality, about mobility and clarity and independence, about being present with those you love instead of managing chronic conditions that could have been addressed earlier. The statistics are sobering. For most major health conditions, early intervention changes everything. Cancer caught at stage 1 has dramatically different outcomes than at stage 3. Metabolic issues addressed before they become diabetes prevent a cascade of complications. Cardiovascular disease identified through subtle early markers can often be reversed before damage becomes permanent. But these early stages are quiet. They don't demand attention. They suggest it softly. And in our noisy world, these suggestions are easy to miss. The paradox is painful. We fear disease, yet ignore its earliest, most treatable signals. We worry about health breakdowns while dismissing the very information that could prevent them. What would change if we approached our bodies with curiosity instead of avoidance? If we saw symptoms not as inconveniences to push through, but as information to interpret? What might shift if we recognize that our bodies aren't machines that break down without warning, but intelligent systems that communicate impending challenges long before crisis? No, it's not just a voice change. It's not just weird swelling. It's your body trying to negotiate with you before it has to fight. The scariest thing about these clues is how easy they are to ignore until they're not. And by then, the shift has already happened. Quietly, behind the scenes of your awareness, cells have changed their behavior. Tissues have altered their composition. Systems have compensated, adapted, struggled, while you carried on, unaware of the work being done to maintain your function despite growing imbalance. When we finally notice symptoms that can't be ignored, we're not seeing the beginning of a problem. We're seeing the end of our body's ability to compensate for it silently. This isn't meant to create fear or hypochondria. It's an invitation to relationship, to conversation with the wisdom of your own physical existence, to a kind of listening that doesn't catastrophize every sensation but doesn't dismiss them either. It's about developing the discernment to know which changes matter, which patterns deserve attention, which whispers might be early echoes of significant shifts. Because your body isn't trying to scare you, it's trying to protect you, to preserve your function, to maintain the delicate, miraculous balance that allows you to move through the world with ease. And all it asks in return is that you pay attention, that you notice what's changing, that you acknowledge its communications before they need to become emergencies. In this attentiveness lies not anxiety, but profound self-care, not obsession, but partnership with your own embodied intelligence. Catching just one of these signs early could add years of mobility and clarity. What's your body trying to say? And when was the last time you actually listened? Because the real danger isn't what hurts, it's what doesn't yet, that tingling you've been ignoring. The slight discoloration you've dismissed. The subtle shift in your energy that isn't bad enough to mention. These aren't just inconveniences, they're invitations to awareness, to prevention, to intervention while options are still wide open. Your body speaks a language older than words, a language of sensation, of pattern, of subtle shifts in function. Learning to listen isn't just medical prudence. It's an act of profound self-respect, of honoring the wisdom and intelligence of the form that carries you through this world. Tonight, before sleep, take a moment. Run your hands over your skin. Notice your breathing. Pay attention to what feels different. What's changed? What's trying to tell you something? Because somewhere in that quiet conversation may be the most important information you'll ever receive. The question isn't whether your body is speaking to you, it's whether you're willing to listen before it has to shout.